Okay, let's dive in, because a big question we're asking today is, have we come to a point where we are no longer able to accept mistakes by celebrities? So there was a recent interview, and Kevin Hart is saying he doesn't understand the expectation to be perfect and says mistakes are how you grow. So Kevin, you'll remember he lost his Oscars hosting gig after old homophobic tweets resurfaced. So do we expect too much? Is there a level of perfection that we are expecting from celebrities?
I mean, it's an interesting thing to unpack. I think it's worth noting that Kevin did apologize numerous times about those homophobic tweets. I want to just start by saying I recently stumbled across this article on BuzzFeed, and the author declared a list, they love lists, of like 15 celebrities who we're no longer, apparently, according to this author, allowed to like. And I remember there were a few on that list that I thought, I can get it. Like, the sort of what they did consistently throughout their career was probably eclipsed any good that they did. But there were a few people on that list, including Prince, where I was like, I'm kind of done with this. And I sat there and thought, we really have got to this point in some instances where we do not allow room for mistakes to take place, and then for apologies to be had, and then for someone else to come out the other side. It's getting harder in many cases. I think we have to remember each one of us is a collection of both of our personal histories, how we were raised, the environments we were in, our good and bad decisions. We all make mistakes, and it's how you show up consistently that matters. And I think Kevin said something. He's a comedian, first of all. Comedians have to try things out, and they're not always going to work, and they're not always going to age well. But he does say, in this article, in this world of opinion, it's okay sometimes to just disagree. It's okay not to like what someone did and to say that person is not for me. I'm curious, what do you think about a statement like that?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because maybe the question I have is, like, are all past mistakes considered equal? I mean, having homophobic slurs in tweets, talking about your old son, I'm pretty sure we talked about it on this show. Like, is that in a different category than, let's say, you being mean to somebody, for example, and there's no slurs attached? And the reason why I bring this up is specifically, you brought up Chrissy Teigen. Chrissy Teigen, if you know, on social media, like Kevin Hart, has been just sort of getting really crucified. She disappeared for a while because of her old tweets that came up that were pretty nasty, but she has apologized. She kind of disappeared again. She has now come out back with more apologies. And now that she's come out, there are other celebrities adding to the pylon. Michael Costello, he was a contestant on Project Runway. He's a designer. He is now coming out and being like, well, actually, in 2014, Chrissy Teigen, treated me awfully. She claimed that I was a racist. It's like I was canceled. So let me just pile on. But what's that saying? He who hath no sin cast the first stone? Because guess what's happening to Michael Costello now? Now you have Leona Lewis, who is the singer. She's like, actually, Michael, can I just talk about you for a second? And now she's coming out with her own story, saying she was made to feel awful, that she wasn't a sample size. He was supposed to make a dress for her for like a charity fashion show, and they were like body shaming her. I think she basically alludes to, she never walked in the fashion show. He never made her a dress, and she said it really hurt her career. Now, there's another makeup artist saying, actually, Michael Costello, you were bullying me when we worked together, and I was going through chemotherapy. And this, here's the thing. You do this, you're saying to the world, I have not made any mistakes. And listen, we're human. It's not true for any single one of us. And so I think for me, where I look at it is, how are you dealing with it afterward? We all have a past, but how are you dealing with it today? That, to me, is perhaps more important.
Can I say that I looked up the word perfection in the dictionary, and it's a quality being free of possible flaws or defects. There isn't a single person out there that hasn't said something, done something, regretted something, and then apologized. But I do wonder, because I was walking into a store with my husband. I stepped on a nail. The nail went through my shoe. I know work with me on this. It does get to the point. And then I went to swear because it hurt and it cut right through. And there was this lovely elderly couple who at that moment said, oh my gosh, I know who you are, and came over to say hello. I did not swear. I was so happy I didn't, because I felt like I have a responsibility in terms of what I do. and representing the brand Bell Media that I work for. And so I often think about that in moments like that. And afterwards, sure, I hobbled away and I was pretty happy about it. It's nowhere near the same thing. It's not about being a celebrity. It is just about being who you are and being authentic to it.
Yeah, so you didn't think you could swear to be human?
No, I didn't think that was appropriate to them. Not in that particular moment, no. But you know what? It's just one of those things that can catch you off guard. But there are so many things that I've done in the past that I, to this day, I often think about, and I wish I could still say I'm sorry. And, some of it dates all the way back to grade 3. But, it's just life. It's who you are. It's who you show up as every day.
Yeah, I think that's a key part of it, what you're saying there, Patty, and what, Melissa, you said at the end of your remarks about like the internal work, right? And I think that's the piece of it that is the other side of this conversation, for sure. I think that the reason why, we, I guess, have asked for perfection or hold perfection up to celebrities is because that's typically the standard that society has set. We all have to be perfect. It's so unrealistic. So saying, like, as Kevin Hart did, I'm not perfect and stop holding me to that standard is for sure one part of the conversation. But then, like, what's the internal work there? Mm-hmm. Cynthia, you mentioned that he apologized many times. I think the issue back in 2019 when that Oscar controversy was happening was, yes, the old homophobia came up, but his immediate reaction to that was actually not very productive. So it wasn't the old stuff that actually, as Wired said, doomed him. It was his immediate reaction was to be defensive. And oftentimes we're defensive because we can't accept our lack of perfectionism. So when our mistakes, we're confronted with them, the reason why we are like, no, you're wrong. I never said I was perfect. No, and the apologies fall flat and the acknowledgement isn't there is because we're internally struggling with this perfection standard. And I don't know that we can ask for change on the outside without doing work on the inside, as you were saying, Mel. So, there are other examples of how celebrities have handled all these scandals and controversies. A very recent one was Ellie Kemper. Ellie Kemper, there's an old photograph. She was 19, surfaced at an event that some people said was affiliated with white supremacy. It was a beauty pageant. And, that came out. Of course, people were like, wow, what is this? She actually took a few days to think about it and then issued an apology after quite some time in media terms these days. And she acknowledged, she was like, my first response was, how dare these people attack me? This is old stuff and I'm not perfect. That was her first response. And she was like, but then I sat with it and I was like, you know what? This is a part of a bigger conversation I get to be part of. So if having this come out about me means that we interrogate power structures and the root of beauty pageants with white supremacy and colonialism, then I'm kind of happy that this came to light and I'm going to keep working on myself. To me, that is what you do when perfectionism fails you. And you ask yourself, how can I acknowledge and do better? And I feel like that is the work.
Yeah, I hear you. I think also that we have to...
Apology? Sorry, I was just going to say,
Pardon?
do you think today, if you've done some of the internal work and then you express yourself and say, I'm truly sorry for these reasons, with somewhat many call a cancel culture out there, are people going to be forgiving of that? What will be the trigger to have someone accept that?
But I think that is the thing. I don't think that it's up to us to ask for the apology to be accepted. That's out of our control. And that is part of perfectionism. So if we're truly trying to dismantle perfectionism, then the work is, what can I do to be better, and not what I can expect my apology, what reaction it elicits in other people. And I think that is the mind tweak that is really, really hard.
Can I also?
I hear you. I think you're right, but I think there's also another piece, which is people doing individual work on themselves, which I think people are spending a lot of time. Mel, you were alluding to this in the examples you gave, where people spend time scrolling on social media and looking for people's past mistakes and looking to call it out without looking to themselves at any level and doing inner work on any of their mistakes and what kind of activism they're doing on an individual level. That's where I take some issue, because it does feel like there's social media. When we talk about perfectionism and the rise of perfectionism, I don't think we can leave social media out of the conversation, because clearly, I mean, I don't have to explain why it's sort of, I feel like, escalated and, created this whole demon of it. Speaking of social media, I will say that last night I woke up in the middle of the night and I happened to notice that someone was trending, Nigerian feminist author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and she was trending because she dropped this gloriously written essay. And I just want to read part of it that I just stuck out. She says, there are many social media savvy people who are choking on sanctimony and lacking in compassion, who can fully pontificate on Twitter about kindness but are unable to actually show kindness. People whose social media lives are case studies in emotional aridity. And I just thought, I mean, there's some really interesting, thought-provoking things that she brought to light. And I do think that, in this conversation of thinking about other people's sins, Mel, goes back to what you were saying. We have to look to ourselves too and do work on ourselves first.
I think that's such a great, interesting example.
When you point at somebody, one finger's pointing out and four fingers are pointing back. And I think that is, for me, what everyone is saying here is the personal work. But it is also when you are doing the work, so to speak, and you believe that you are in a good place, your character also stands for hopefully vouching for yourself. In other words, when I look at what's happening with Chrissy Teigen and I see the work that she's doing and how contrite and sorry and authentic I believe her to actually be, but you also look at her history. Is it like tons of mistakes that she keeps screwing up and saying sorry and then not changing anything? Or is it that, no, she has proven that she's so human. She's able to call herself out. It's not cancel culture, as we've said many times in the show. It's call out culture. And are you able and willing to call yourself out? And so I think the bottom line is I would like to hope that everybody has that grace to realize we're all going to screw up. You might not have a massive platform where everyone's going to then be pointing at you, but does your character hold up? Are you still ultimately a good person, or like, the poet and author, or are you just doing constantly this and never willing to look inside?
I think that also, too, to your point, Cynthia, it's about not just reading one thing and having the quickest reaction to it. And your example is a really good one with what was trending about Chimamanda yesterday, because I saw that too. I was following it too. I read her piece, and my initial reaction was also wow, this is awesome. And then, of course, I wanted to participate in more discourse, and I was looking into what the root of it was. And the root ended up being way more complicated. And then now there is actually, there is actually, there's the trash, but there's actually a really good conversation about Chimamanda's use of her own power in, calling out the people she's calling out. And the people she's calling out happen to be two trans women of color. And her past happened to be what she was criticized for being anti-trans. So there became a conversation about, should this have happened? Should she have used her platform in this way with two lesser profile trans women activists? And should she have done this during Pride Month? And so that's not to say anyone's wrong or anyone's right, but hopefully that's what you want, is having these conversations and getting to the nuance instead of just reading one thing and being I'm on this person's side, and not actually going deeper into what that issue was.
Yeah. Well,
we could do a whole conversation around that, but we won't. We don't have time for that.
No kidding. But, as we go to break, look what happened to Michael Costello. You want to point the finger? There's four pointing back at you. So be careful. We're going to...